With the exception of the engine oil, I don't think any other consumable on this car has been changed for at least a decade. You know, the thermostat, the spark plugs, the air filter, everything looks horrible. So to be belt and braces, I thought I'd better change the gearbox oil. It's just a good thing to do every now and again. I took out the speedo cable to be able to feed the oil back in, and just now I tried to take out the sump plug, and it almost defied me. This wasn't enough. I had to get the impact wrench out with, 2 foot of extension on it to be able to get the sump plug off. I would almost put money that this is the original 30-year-old gearbox oil. Well overdue a change, and again, another one of those things that if you are ever thinking about restoring a car, just do it. It's 30 quid for a gearbox oil, and it just makes such a difference to how the gears change, how the car runs, but more importantly, you know in your head that it's done and it's right. It's a small thing, but why it's not done more often, I just don't know. Until my garage gets built, I really have no choice but to work out of my tiny shed and off the driveway, but it could be worse. On a day like today, the sun is shining, you can hear the kids playing in the park. It's really quite pleasant. And in terms of working on the ground, you put some cardboard down, it's really not so bad. What does suck though is that every day I've got to take all my tools back out again, and every night I've got to put them all away again. And it takes about an hour to put them away, and that's not really organizing them that greatly. That's just chucking them in general piles and sticking them in the boot or back in the shed. But you know what, I'm not going to complain. At least I have a driveway, and the sun is out, the roof is down, and I got jobs to be cracking on with. Job 1 today will be to refill the gearbox with its gearbox oil. I'm going to put the plug in, put the speedo cable back in, and that'll be that job done. I'm also going to put the thermostat in, new gasket, new thermostat, and then I'm going to pop the housing on and reconnect all the hoses that are all over the place. I have a new temperature sensor on order, but that's an easy thing to fit. That just pops in there, and I don't have to reconnect everything or disconnect everything to be able to make it fit. So let's get that job done as well. After that, I'm going to put the airbox in and all the sort of auxiliary cables and hoses that go with that. That wasn't mounted properly either, so a bit of working out to do to how to make that all fit in properly. And on this side of the engine, I'm going to put the water pump in, which goes in down there. Oh, sorry, you can't see that there. I'm going to put the idler pulley in. Before I do all that though, I'm going to start cleaning this up. There's a lot of sort of residue on the engine and a lot of dust, and there's even a little bit of surface rust here on the cam sprocket, so that all needs a bit of cleaning before I introduce the new timing belt. I want this into the engine looking amazing. I've also noticed in the back of the engine, you probably can't see it, but there's a cable, an earth cable missing off the back of the alternator, so that needs to be fixed up as well. It's going to be a tricky job because it's buried at the back of the engine. Once all that's done, the next job is to tackle the front end. Now there are 2 fiberglass structures behind the bumper. This one not only holds the bumper, it also holds the intercooler, and on this side it holds the oil cooler as well, and it's broken. So I need to figure out a way of making this work so that it's strong again. There's actually a few little breaks on it so that it can both hold the bumper and the oil cooler in place properly. If I get all that done, then the next job to do will be get in underneath it and just spinning around to get at those cooling fans. They're very much tucked away. It's going to be a nightmare of a job to do that, but they have to be done, and it's much easier to do that without the bumper in place. So I'm not going to put the bumper on today. If I get all that done, I'll consider that a good day's work. And you know what? The sun is shining. I might even take the bike out this evening. Little treat. This car must have had some really odd owners who've done some really odd things to it. Take a look at this wheel arch, for example. I've spent a lot of the day scraping this stuff, this weird wax sealant off this chassis leg, because you know, it was covered in it, and it really worried me that there was something dodgy going on underneath. As it turns out, it's just a bit of surface rust. I'll treat that, paint it up, it'll be good as new, and it'll all be hidden by the wheel arch liner anyways. But I just don't understand why you would do this to a car. Look at that. And to me, all this does is just trap just nastiness underneath. You know, I don't see why you'd need to put this on a car. And moreover, if you are going to put it on, you know, whoever put this on, it looks like they did it with a slurry spreader. It's everywhere. So over time, I'll be taking these wheel arch liners off and giving it a bit of a scrape, because this is just horrible and nasty, and it has no place in a car like this. So here's a slightly different view of the timing belt end of the engine for you. I'm pretty happy with how the cleanup has gone. I've got most of the surface contamination off. A few little areas that the Dremel won't reach into, so I'll finish those by hand. But overall, happy with how that looks, particularly around the water pump, where I've given the gasket area a really good scrub so that the water pump gasket will make a nice tight seal and hopefully won't leak ever again. But that's pretty much it. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the water pump in, but just hand tighten it, and same with the idler pulley, because I'll torque the whole lot up properly when I'm finishing the car off, I think. Otherwise, here's the other end of the engine. I'm really pleased with all this. My airbox is now in, nice and solid, not flapping around like it was. I've been over all the hoses, all the wiring, routed everything through properly. The thermostat housing is in, thermostat is in, just waiting for the temperature sensor. The expansion tank has now been cleaned, you know, new clamps gone on, and everything is just really neat and tidy down here. I've even given, you know, the chassis leg a good clean, and the top of the gearbox as well has been given a good scrub. So it's been a very, very productive day that overall I'm very happy with. But enough is enough. I'm tired. It'll take me about an hour, as I explained earlier, to clean all this crap up. So by the time I'm done, it'll be quite late. Sun's going down. I still haven't been out on the bike, which I'm dying to do. And that's it really. I'll take a few days away from the car. I didn't get everything I wanted to get done today because you never do. There's always things that pop up, like the weird wax stuff in the wheel arch, and the airbox being sort of in bad condition. The little things like that will slow you down, but that's old cars. They'll always throw stuff like that up at you. And then other times you come out prepared to work for hours on a problem, and it all comes apart nice and simple. So you can never tell with them. But I'm happy with today's progress, but I'm done for now. There's a point in every car build when something happens and you just think, I'm not going to be able to do this. This car does not want to come back to life. Happened to me when I took the cam belt cover off and saw the mess underneath. I just thought, this car is going to kill me. But there's also a moment that you get to when you realize, you know what, I'm going to do this. And it happened to me when I was changing the gearbox oil, oddly. It was really tricky to get the expansion tank and the airbox out, to get down, to get good access in there. But once I put the gearbox oil in, it all went back together really well. And it was at that point I realized I'm actually starting to put it properly back together now. I've done all the prep work. Now I'm on the home straight. I can see the finish line. And that's why I'm out here in the less than ideal conditions, finishing my oil cooler box. There was a little bracket on it here that broke off. That's meant to go on there. I fashioned this instead out of a little piece of metal that I had, bolted it on. I was going to rivet it, but I think the bolts work better. This bit's broken down here again. Just going to reinforce it with a bit of metal, bolt it together, and that will be good as new. So it's another box ticked, and I'm just another little bit closer to getting this car finished. The last parts I need are coming in on Wednesday, so you never know. I might have this thing running by the weekend. I'm dressed a little more snazzily than usual, and that's because I've been in the office today. We've had a few meetings, which is both a bit weird and a bit nice. I do miss the human interaction with your colleagues, so it's nice to see them face to face as opposed to little tiny digital boxes. And what made the experience doubly pleasant is I come home and find my box of parts have arrived early. So I have my cooling fans. These aren't too expensive actually. There we go. They're about 60 quid each, maybe a little more. But given the importance of the job they do, I'm really happy to have them here. It's also good to see where they're mounted, because I'm going to be groping around behind the radiator kind of blindly. It's good to know where I should be aiming my socket set. So great to see these. And also, yeah, they'll need a little bit of wiring, but hopefully nothing too arduous. The other things I ordered the timing belt before, but I forgot to order the auxiliary belts. I wanted to get them off anyway, just to make sure I'd ordered the right ones, the right size. So that's them. There's my tensioner pulley. I have an idler pulley already. And then the last thing is these little door clips. When you take the door cards off, these clips generally break. So to have nice new ones to pop in is really exciting. And also my touch-up paint. It isn't going to solve all of my paint issues. Front bumper, for example, is pretty rough. But it will spruce up a lot of the body work and a lot of the chips around the car. So very excited to get stuck in. Yeah, I'm all set up for a very busy and hopefully very productive weekend. Nope, not Halloween, just me giving you a very quick update. So after I fed the kids, I thought it'd be a good idea to come out here and try and get those radiator fans in. And it turns out that access to these bolts that are holding it on are horrible, and the bolts themselves are all rusty. So I squirted them with WD-40 and just decided, you know what, I'll leave them for now. It's too late, it's too dark, I'm too tired. Let's do something relatively simple. I say that, but even a simple job like putting this air intake hose turned out to be really tricky. That's the little air intake itself. It was riveted to the fiberglass intercooler structure. Those rivets had all rusted, so I had to drill those out, screw it in, rust treated, painted up. So happy with that now. And then putting the air hose in again, access really tricky back up to the air box. When I took this out, I noticed that the pipe was all crushed here, and I was very sniffy about that, thinking it was shoddy workmanship. But when I went to put it back in, I realized that the distance between the chassis leg and the gearbox was smaller than the diameter of the intake hose, so I had to crush it back again. Yes, I know. But anyway, it's one job done. I've got 20 on my list. That's one done, so now I'm down to 19. It's a small step, but it's a little bit closer to getting this thing done. And you know what? I'm still confident that hopefully by the end of the weekend, this thing will at the very least be running, provided I haven't done any permanent damage when I snap the timing belt taking it off. Two quick thoughts before I head to bed. Number one, LED interior lights. They're a really quick and cheap upgrade, and the quality of light you get is so much better, and also the drain on the battery is a lot less. Is there anything cooler? Well, actually there is. This. I will never, ever, ever get tired of doing this. Okay, I better stop now. I've just got the fan, one of the fans, out of the Elan, and let me tell you, this was a horrible, horrible job. Trying to access the bolts was terrible. They're tiny little 8mm things. One of them snapped off, so that's something to worry about. And then the access on this side was just horrible. I had the intercooler hose in the way, I had the auxiliary water pump in the way, the anti-roll bar, and then it sits here and behind these little lips on the frame that they sit in, again blocking getting it out. The sad and depressing thing is that that's the easy one. The other one is in here down by the turbo. I can't even get my hand down to it. I've no idea how I'm going to get this thing out. This one bloody well near kill me. I'd like to share my bodge of the build so far. So this is the auxiliary water pump. I have it strapped up here now just to get it out of my way. It normally sits in this little clamp here, but it's ever, I'll drop it in, it's ever so slightly too big for the clamp. So the bodge, a latex glove as a damper. I kind of admire the ingenuity of it, but it's a bit depressing really. You know, on a sports car like this, to put a rubber glove in the engine bay. It's getting quite late, and I really should stop, because very often when it's late and you're tired, that's when you make expensive mistakes. But I'm in a bit of a flow, so I'm going to press on. And the reason I'm in a flow is because I have both fans out. The first one was a nightmare to get out, but the fan itself is in reasonably good nick. Shroud is solid. The fan is, well, it's present. It's a little bit rusty. There's quite a few score marks on it. and also don't forget it blew all the fuses inside, so the chances are it's probably shot. The second one flew out by comparison, partly because yeah, just you learn as you go. So taking the first one out, it's all a bit of an unknown, but having done one, the second fan is the same thing basically, so your brain just understands how to do it a little bit quicker. That's part of the reason. The other part of the reason was a lot of the fasteners weren't done up properly, and the reason for that is because the fan is in such bad shape. Apart from being covered in overspray, it's got this incredible bodge weld. Check this out. It starts here, and this hammered and bent and battered bit of metal is wrapped around the fan and then welded on the other end as well over here. So it's more than half the fan shroud is, well, I don't know what it is. It's just a piece of battered steel that's been welded onto this thing. How this thing worked at all, I don't know, because it actually catches the shroud as it goes around. I take back what I said earlier on about the latex glove. This is an impressive piece of bodgery. This is the bodge of the build. I feel like I owe you a proper look at the cooling fans in the cold, harsh light of day. This is the passenger side one. This is the first one I took off. And as you can see, it's a bit stiff, so it's probably not working very well, if at all. But, it looks like it's had a long, hard, honest life at least. And now that life is at an end. This is the driver's side one. This is the one that's tucked away behind the turbo, so normally you can't see it, and it's probably a good thing too. It's very stiff compared to the other one, so it's clearly knackered. It's also covered in overspray. This isn't road grime, that's paint. And then you flick it over and the world's worst repair job awaits you, along with some of the world's shittiest welding. Look at that. So that sets a whole lot of alarm bells ringing. Fortunately, it was easier to get off than the first one. So on the passenger side, the gap between that, which is the anti-roll bar, and the frame that supports the fan is narrower than the fan shroud. And that, combined with a million pipes and hoses around it and the secondary water pump, meant that it was quite difficult to get out, quite an ordeal. Now this side I thought was going to be horrendous, but once you take this heat shield out of the way, you can just about get a socket down there and undo the top bolts. And then when it comes to the bottom bolts, if you look on this side, there's the oil cooler. The shroud on the passenger side that houses the intercooler, that shroud is missing on this side because I've taken it off to fix it, which means access is super easy. Well, I won't say super easy, but a lot easier underneath. You can actually see the fans in there. So it took a bit of lying on the ground and a bit of reaching in and a bit of blind fiddling, but it went in pretty easy. And what also helped it was the fact that these fans are considerably lighter and thinner than the ones that they replaced. So all in all, I'm really happy with that. That was one of the jobs I was dreading from the start. I'm at a point in the build now where I've still got a few odd jobs to do and I've got some cosmetic work to do, but I'm actually ready to see if this thing will actually come back to life. This is a very exciting but mostly pants soiling moment, because this is it. This is the culmination of hours and hours and hours of work. I have all the parts that I need. In fact, I've hand tightened most of them in there already. There's my water pump, there's the idle pulley, and there's the tensioner pulley. They're already in. I have my torque settings here, including a rather beefy 123 pound-feet for the crank bolt. I have all the auxiliary belts. I've pretty much got everything I need to put it back together and see if it turns over. You know, it's wonderful when it works. There's always that thing in the back of your mind, no matter how many times you check and double check and double check, you know, there's always that bit when you turn the key, is this actually going to work? And the other key thing as well, remember when I took this apart, the timing belt snapped so that the crank did spin a bit, and I am worried that maybe one of the pistons maybe hit the valves. I doubt it, and if it did, I can't imagine it would have hit it with a lot of force, but until you put it all back together and actually turn the key, you just don't know. Wish me luck. I've been working on the cam belt for the past couple of hours actually, and I'm a little bit stressed out because I've done it probably 6 or 7 times at this stage, and it's in, but every time I put it in, the timing marks are out ever so slightly, like half a tooth on the cam sprockets, and then when I put the tension on it down at the crank end, that knocks that timing mark out half a tooth as well. But I've done it 6 times every which way I can possibly think of, including even rolling the crank forward by a tooth to see that if laying it in that way when I apply the tensioner would straighten it up, and it's still reverted back to that same position. So I can only assume that over 30 years the tolerances have shifted ever so slightly, and those timing marks, while close, are not quite as true as they once were. I don't think I've any choice. I mean, I've done it 6 times, 7 times. I don't really know what else to do. I think the only thing to do at this stage, I've turned it over by hand and there's no interference, nothing's hitting, the pistons are not hitting the valves, so that's all okay. But as you know, you get one tooth out, the thing can run like crap, so I don't know what to do. Do I dare try turning it over and see what happens? I'm at the point now I can't really put this off any longer. I have no choice but to turn this car over. Not literally, but the engine. If it doesn't work, I might think about turning it over. Now, I've checked everything. I've rotated the engine by hand. There's nothing hitting. It's nice and smooth. I've got new plugs in, new fuel in the tank. Everything is good to go. I just need to muster up the courage, turn the key. Let's have a look, see what happens. Okay, here, you're with me. Unedited, raw, here we go. I got lights. It runs. It runs. It runs. It's settling down to a decent idle.